We have already covered all Turkic and Mongolic languages in previous videos, and now it's time to explore the Tungusic languages. I'm particularly excited about this episode because there's not much content about the Tungusic languages on the internet, and I aim to create the most substantial video on this topic. So buckle up, grab your tea or coffee, and let's dive into the world of Tungusic languages and people. The Tungusic language family is characterized by its agglutinative structure, where words are formed by adding morphemes to a root, and by the presence of a vowel harmony, which ensures consistency in vowel sounds within a word. These languages typically follow a subject, object, verb, word order and feature a rich case system that marks grammatical relations such as subject, object, and direction. Despite these shared features, the Tungusic languages are highly diverse, with speakers historically spread across Siberia, northeastern China, and Mongolia. However, many of these languages are now critically endangered, with efforts to preserve them facing significant challenges. The Tungusic people comprise various indigenous groups who primarily live in Siberia and northeastern China. Historically, the Tungusic tribes are believed to have originated in the region between Lake Baikal and the Amur River. Archaeological and linguistic evidence indicates that the ancestors of the Tungusic peoples were among the early inhabitants of the Siberian taiga and surrounding areas. Over millennia, they migrated and settled in various parts of Siberia, Manchuria, and Mongolia. Their culture and social organization evolved in response to the diverse and often harsh environments in which they lived. Traditionally, the Tungusic people were semi-nomadic hunters, fishers, and gatherers. They lived in small mobile communities, relying on the rich natural resources of the Siberian taiga and Manchurian forests. The most common academic perspective divides the Tungusic people into two subgroups, Northern Tungusic people and Southern Tungusic people. This division is also reflected in the classification of their languages, with the Northern Tungusic branch and the Southern Tungusic branch. The Northern Tungusic people lived in the harsher climates of Siberia and primarily engaged in reindeer husbandry, hunting, and fishing. They had closer interactions with the Mongols and Turks. In contrast, the Southern Tungusic people lived in Manchuria, which is in northeast China, and followed a more sedentary lifestyle. Unlike the Northern Tungusic people, the Southern Tungusics were more influenced by the Koreans and Chinese. Today, the total population of the Tungusic people is approximately 10.7 million. However, the total number of Tungusic speakers is around 75,000, which is not even 1% of the population. This is a worrying trend, and it highlights the fact that the Tungusic language family is severely endangered. Shibe is spoken by the Shibe people, who are officially recognized as one of the 56 minority groups in China. According to the 2010 census, there are 190,481 Shibe people in China. Although the main hub of the Shibe people is considered to be the northwest part of the country, there is also a group of Shibe people living at the opposite edge of China. Compared to the eastern Shibes, the western Shibes have managed to preserve their culture to a much higher degree. The clearest evidence of this is the language. Eastern Shibes are mostly Sinicized, and as a result, they don't speak Shibe. However, the Shibe community in northwest China still actively speaks the Shibe language. There are two main theories about the origin of the Shibes. The more commonly accepted theory claims that the Shibe people are a branch of another Tungusic group, the Manchu people. It is believed that in the 18th century, China's Shang dynasty resettled a group of Manchu people in western China. Their aim was to form a garrison out of these Manchus and use them to defend the western frontier of the country against external threats. The other theory, although not widely accepted, suggests that the Shibe descended from the Xianbei people, an ancient nomadic group that inhabited Central Asia 2 millennia ago. Historically, the Shibe had a solid reputation for being excellent horse riders and archers. Traditionally, they have followed shamanism and Buddhism. Over the past centuries, the Shibes built several Buddhist monasteries in northwest China, all of which are now in ruins. Today, like many other smaller Turkic, Mongolic, and Tungusic communities in China, the Shibe mainly engage in farming and animal husbandry. The Shibes have preserved many of their cultural elements such as traditional cuisine, clothing, dances, music, and instruments. In comparison to the other Tungusic languages that we'll be covering in this video, Shibe is in relatively better condition. Today, in Kapgal Shibe Autonomous County in China, where most of the Shibe live, this language is taught in several primary schools. There are also Shibe language classes at Yili Normal University. Since 1946, a newspaper named Kapkal News has been publishing weekly papers in the Shibe language. It is said that the weekly circulation is around 1,000, which is actually not bad at all. In addition to this, in Kapgal-Shibe Autonomous County, there are often radio and TV broadcasts in the Shibe language. Now let's take a look at the language profile of Shibe. If you have seen my recent videos about the Turkic and Mongolic languages, then you must be familiar with this term. If not, language profile is a term I coined for this language video series. Shibe is written with the Manchu alphabet. It is the most spoken Tungusic language with around 30,000 speakers. Shibe belongs to the southern Tungusic branch and its status is severely endangered. Evenki is spoken by the Evenki people who are spread over a vast area comprising Siberia, China and Mongolia. The Evenki people are recognized as minorities in both China and Russia. The 2010, 2015 and 2021 censuses shows us that there are 30,875 Evenkis in China, 537 in Mongolia, and 39,226 in Russia. Therefore, the global population of the Evenki people is close to 71,000. Traditionally, the Evenki were nomadic hunter-gatherers and reindeer herders adapted to the harsh Siberian environment. They have cultural and genetic ties to the other indigenous Siberian groups and have historically interacted with neighboring Mongolic, Turkic and Chinese peoples. One interesting point we see on this map is that none of the other Tungusic people inhabit such a vast area as the Evenkis. Even in modern-day Russia, after the Russians, the Evenkis are the second ethnic group that covers the largest land in the country. But why is that? What made the Evenkis spread to such a vast territory? The answer lies in reindeer. Many of the indigenous groups who have inhabited Siberia over the past centuries used reindeer primarily for meat, milk and basic transportation. However, the Evenkis mastered how to ride them. As a result, they were able to venture into the vast uncharted territories of Siberia. Despite their small population, they spread over a huge area. Regarding the origin of the Evenki people, a quote by linguist Glafira Makarievna Vasilyevich summarizes the most widely accepted theory. The origin of the Evenki is the result of complex processes, different in time, involving the mixing of different ancient aboriginal tribes from the north of Siberia with tribes related in language to the Turks and Mongols. So, although the Evenkis are considered part of the Tungusic people today, they are culturally influenced by other indigenous groups depending on where they live. For example, the Evenkis here would be culturally and to some extent linguistically influenced by the Turkic people and other indigenous groups of Siberia, whereas here, Mongol influence would be more prevalent and here Chinese influence would be stronger. Despite these differences among widespread Evenki communities, one thing still acts as the backbone of Evenki society, the Evenki language. Today, only a very small portion of the Evenkis engage in reindeer herding. Most of them work in industries such as farming, regional industries and animal husbandry. Most of the Evenkis today follow a belief system that is a mix of shamanism, animism and Tibetan Buddhism. A small percentage of the Evenkis are Orthodox Christians due to the influence of the Russian Orthodox Church. The word shaman comes from the Evenki language. Even in modern-day Evenki society, shamans hold an important place and are often consulted regarding health and spiritual matters. Today, many Evenkis strongly adhere to their traditions. We can still see practices of ancestor worship and prayers to the mountain god, wind god and fire god among the Evenkis. Compared to China, the Evenki language has a much stronger status in Russia. In Russia, in addition to a larger Evenki-speaking population, there is also a weekly newspaper named Evenkiskaya Zhizn, which is published in both Russian and Evenki. Here you can see a page from this newspaper in the Evenki language. In Russia, Evenki is written in the Cyrillic script, and in China it is written either in the Latin or traditional Mongolian script. Unfortunately, there is little to no information about the Evenki language in Mongolia. Around 11,000 people are estimated to speak Evenki. This language is a member of the Northern Tungusic branch and its status is severely endangered. Evan is the northernmost spoken Tungusic language. It is the language of the Evan people, who, as you might surmise, are also the northernmost Tungusic people. They live in the farthest reaches of deep Siberia. The Evans are related to the Evenki people, whom I mentioned a few seconds ago. These two groups share many cultural and linguistic similarities. In addition to Evenki, Russian has also influenced Evan quite significantly. As you see on this map, the Evans inhabit an enormous area. Despite their small population of 20,000, the Avans cover a landmass as large as Western Europe. Like the Evenki people, the Avans have traditionally been reindeer herders for centuries. The lands that the Avans inhabit have very harsh weather and living conditions, leaving them with little choice but to rely on reindeer for nearly everything in their lives. These are the lands that are unsuitable for horse riding, farming and fishing for most of the year. Centuries ago, when the Avans first encountered the Turks and Mongols, they were introduced to a horse-based culture. However, after a short attempt, the Avans abandoned using horses in their daily lives because they were simply unable to ride horses in the harsh Siberian terrain. It wouldn't be wrong to say that nature and reindeer herding are two of the most prominent elements of Avan culture. As a result, the Avan language has a significantly large vocabulary related to their nomadic lifestyle and reindeer herding. For example, the Avans use 14 different words to describe similar actions related to herding and grazing. Although the Avans predominantly followed shamanism and animism in the past, today most of them are Orthodox Christians. In fact, the Avans are one of the most Christianized peoples of the north, but why is that? The answer lies in the Russian influence. Starting from the 1800s, the Russians built many churches along Avan seasonal migration routes, and Russian missionaries were very active in the Avan community. Today, only a small number of Avans adhere to their traditional beliefs. Today, Avan is taught in a number of schools and universities. In 2010, there were 5,700 speakers, and by 2021, this number had risen to 7,200, indicating that the teaching of the Avan language has yielded positive results. Avan uses the Cyrillic script. As mentioned earlier, 7,200 people speak this language. Avan belongs to the northern Tungusic branch, and its status is classified as severely endangered. Nanai is the language of the Nanai people, who live in Russia's Khabarovsk Krai, a region bordering China's northern frontier and the Pacific Ocean. There is also a Nanai community in northeast China's Heilongjiang province. A small difference is that the Nanai people in China are more commonly known as the Hezan. The Nanai population is approximately 11,600 in Russia and 5,300 in China. The Nanai people are descendants of ancient populations that lived in the Amur River basin for thousands of years. Their ancestors likely belonged to the early Tungusic-speaking tribes that migrated into modern-day northeast China from central Siberia. Over time, the Nanai developed a distinct identity shaped by their adaptation to the riverine and forested environment of the Amur Basin and their interactions with neighboring groups such as Chinese, Mongol, and later Russian populations. The Nanai's main economic activity was fishing, historically the cornerstone of their subsistence. The Amur River provided a rich source of fish, which the Nanai utilized in various creative ways, particularly in the creation of fish skin clothing, a unique aspect of their culture. This tradition led to the Nanai being called the fish skin tribe. Just like the Nanai people, the Nanai language is also known as Hezan in China. Compared to Russia, this language has a much more fragile status in China. Unfortunately, I was unable to find a precise number for Nanai speakers in China, but this number is presumed to be only a few dozen. In Russia, however, there is a much more united Nanai community working to preserve the language. The 2021 census shows that 6,600 people speak Nanai in Russia. However, only a fraction of these 6,600 people are able to speak Nanai with native level fluency. Field studies have shown that most young Nanai speak Russian as their native language and have only an intermediate knowledge of Nanai. Today, mostly those over 40 in the Nanai community speak their ancestral language fluently. Currently, Nanai is taught in several villages in Khabarovsk Krai, though this education is sufficient only for students to learn Nanai as a second language. In addition, the Nanai community in Russia is actively working on publishing books and other printed materials in the Nanai language, which are also used in schools. In Russia, Nanai is written in the Cyrillic script. In China, since Nanai is primarily a spoken language, there is no official alphabet used. Including a few dozen speakers in China, approximately 6,700 people speak this language in total. Nanai belongs to the southern Tungusic branch. Its status is considered severely endangered. Orakan is spoken by the Orakan people, who live in northeast China's Inner Mongolia and Heilongjiang provinces. With a population of around 8,600, they are the second smallest Tungusic minority in China. The Oroken are believed to have descended from ancient Tungusic tribes that inhabited the vast forested regions of northeastern China. Their ancestors were hunter-gatherers who navigated the dense forest and river valleys of this region for thousands of years. The name Oroken itself means people of the reindeer, reflecting their deep connection to the forest and wildlife. As they settled in the dense forests of northeastern China, the Oroken developed a distinct culture centered on hunting, fishing, and gathering. Their language evolved in relative isolation from other Tungusic languages, contributing to the unique cultural and linguistic identity of the Oroken people. The Oroken's connection to the natural environment was central to their way of life. They practiced shamanism with a strong belief in the spirits of nature and their ancestors. Shamans played a crucial role in their society, performing rituals to communicate with the spirit world, heal the sick, and ensure successful hunts. Over the centuries, the Oroken interacted with other ethnic groups in the region, including the Mongols, Manchus, and Han Chinese. These interactions influenced their culture and language, but did not fundamentally alter their identity. The Oroken maintained their distinct way of life even as they were incorporated into larger political entities such as the Qing dynasty, where they served as hunters and soldiers. Today, their main economic activity is agriculture. Since hunting in the forest lands surrounding the Oroken settlements is forbidden by the Chinese government, the Oroken have adopted a more sedentary lifestyle. Since the 1950s, Christianity has become increasingly popular in the Oroken community, particularly after the last Oroken shaman died in the year 2000, marking a significant decline in shamanism. As you can see on this map, the Oroken lived close to the Evenki-speaking tribes, which resulted in Oroken absorbing significant influence from Evenki. Today, Oroken and Evenki speakers can understand each other to a considerable degree. Oroken does not have a strong written tradition. Although Latin script is used at times, most Orokens use Mandarin for written communication. It is estimated that fewer than 1,000 people speak this language. Oroken belongs to the Northern Tungusic branch, and its status is classified as severely endangered. Udege, also known as Udihe, is one of the more endangered Tungusic languages. It is spoken by the Udege minority who inhabit Russia's Far East, specifically Primorsky Krai, which borders China and North Korea. According to the 2021 Russian census, there are 1,325 Udege in Russia, making them one of the smallest ethnic groups in the country. The origin of the Udege people is not well studied and therefore remains obscure. However, the most commonly accepted theory is that they are closely tied to the broader history of the Tungusic peoples. The Udege are thought to have originated from the mingling of various Tungusic tribes with other indigenous groups in the Russian Far East. These interactions likely took place over thousands of years, leading to the unique cultural and linguistic traits of the Udege. The Udege have been traditionally semi-nomadic, relying on hunting, fishing, and gathering for their subsistence. They are skilled hunters, particularly known for their use of dog sleds and skis in the harsh winter conditions of the taiga. Their primary prey includes sable, deer, and other forest animals, and they possess deep knowledge of the taiga's flora and fauna. I feel like I'm repeating myself when I discuss the origins, cultures, and lifestyles of the Tungusic people, but it reflects the reality of their situation. Most of the Tungusic people have lived in similar habitats that offer a limited range of daily life practices, so the information I provide about them often overlaps. The Udege have a rich spiritual tradition deeply connected to nature. They practice animism, believing that all elements of the natural world, animals, plants, rivers, and mountains are inhabited by spirits. These spirits must be respected and can influence human lives. Shamans, who act as intermediaries between the human and spirit worlds, have historically played a central role in Udege society, conducting rituals and ceremonies to ensure successful hunts, heal the sick, and maintain harmony with the spirits. Today, only a handful of Udege adhere to their traditional religious practices. The lands where the Udege community lives today are also the habitat of Siberian tigers, which they hold in almost divine reverence. Hunting this species is considered unholy. For years, the Siberian tigers and the Udege have shared vast forest lands and lived side by side in harmony. As you can see on this map, the Udege live almost side by side with the Nanai and Oroch people. As you might surmise, this has resulted in the Udege sharing many cultural similarities with the Nanai and Oroch people and borrowing a lot of loanwords from the Nanai and Oroch languages. Just a side note, Oroch is one of the Tungusic languages that we'll cover soon in this video. Until the 1930s, Udege was a spoken language only and did not have a writing system. Initially, a Latin script was created for Udege, but in 1938, the Cyrillic script, which is still used today, was adopted. For reference, before moving on to the language profile, I would like to show you how the Latin and Cyrillic scripts for Udege look. Now, regarding the language profile, as mentioned, Udege uses the Cyrillic script. The 2021 Russian census shows that around 600 people speak Udege. However, if we only count those who can speak Udege with native fluency, there are fewer than 100 speakers. This language belongs to the southern Tungusic branch, and its status is critically endangered. We stay in the Udege homeland that we have covered, but travel a little farther north to the coast of Russia, right across from Sakhalin Island. Here we encountered the Ulch people, one of the Tungusic tribes in this vast region. The Ulch people speak a language named after them, the Ulch language. Today, the Ulch population in Russia is 2,472, making them one of the smallest ethnic groups in the country. Just like many of the Tungusic people featured in this video, the ancestors of the Ulch people were ancient inhabitants of the Siberian taiga. They are closely related to other Tungusic peoples such as the Nanai and the Oroch. Traditionally, the Ulch people were semi-nomadic, engaging in fishing, hunting, and gathering as their primary means of subsistence. The Amur River, rich in fish like sturgeon and salmon, has played a central role in their economy and culture. Fishing is not just a livelihood, but also a cultural practice deeply embedded in their rituals and traditions. Throughout their history, the Ulch have interacted with various neighboring groups, including the Nanai, Oroch, and even more distant groups like the Ainu of Japan's Hokkaido Island and the Nivg of Sakhalin. These interactions were often characterized by trade, intermarriage, and cultural exchange. The Ulch traded fish, furs, and other goods with their neighbors, contributing to a shared cultural region along the Amur River. The Ulch have a rich cultural heritage that includes folklore and traditional crafts. Their crafts often involve materials such as fish skin, birch bark, and wood used to create clothing, tools, and other everyday items. Shamanism has historically been an important part of Ulch's spiritual life. These practices involve rituals, dances, and use of sacred objects to communicate with spirits and ancestors. While many Ulch have converted to Orthodox Christianity due to Russian influence, traditional beliefs and practices still persist, especially among the older generation. Today, like many indigenous groups in Russia, the Ulch people face significant challenges, including the loss of their language, cultural assimilation, and economic hardships. Industrial development and environmental changes in the region have also impacted their traditional ways of life. Efforts are being made to preserve the Ulch language and culture, but these efforts face obstacles due to the small population and limited resources. Until the 1930s, Ulch did not have a writing system. Today, although Cyrillic script is officially used, Ulch is almost exclusively a spoken language. There are currently around 100 speakers of this language. It belongs to the southern Tungusic branch, and its status is critically endangered. Oroch, also known as Orochi, is spoken by the Oroch people. The 2021 Russian census shows that there are 527 Oroch people in Russia. The precise origins of the Oroch are difficult to pinpoint due to the lack of written records. However, it is generally believed that the Oroch, like other Tungusic groups, migrated to their current homeland in the Russian Far East over several millennia. They traditionally lived as semi-nomadic hunters, fishers, and gatherers in the riverine and coastal areas of what is now Khabarovsk Krai. Their way of life was intimately connected to the Amur River and the surrounding forests, where they hunted game such as deer and wild boar, fished for salmon and other fish, and gathered wild plants. The Oroch practiced animism, with a strong belief in spirits associated with nature, and their shamans played a central role in religious and social life. The arrival of Russian explorers and traders in the 17th century marked the beginning of significant changes for the Oroch people. With Russian colonization came the imposition of taxes, forced assimilation, and the spread of diseases to which the Oroch and other indigenous groups had little resistance. These factors led to a decline in their population and a disruption of their traditional way of life. During the Soviet era, the Oroch, like many other indigenous groups, were subjected to policies aimed at integrating them into the Soviet system. This included the establishment of collective farms, the promotion of Russian as a dominant language, and efforts to suppress indigenous cultures and religions. Many Oroch were resettled into larger centralized villages, and their children were often sent to boarding schools where they were taught Russian and discouraged from practicing their traditional customs. The Oroch language evolved with its own specific vocabulary, mainly in areas related to their subsistence practices such as hunting, fishing, and gathering. This linguistic evolution reflects the Oroch's deep connection to their land and way of life. Oroch is known to have several dialects, although the distinctions between them are not always clear due to the limited number of speakers and the declining use of the language. These dialects likely correspond to the different clans and geographical areas where the Oroch lived. The Oroch community today is quite endangered. They continue to face challenges related to cultural preservation, economic marginalization, and environmental degradation. However, there have been efforts in recent years to revive and promote the Oroch language and culture, including the teaching of the Oroch language in schools and the organization of cultural festivals. Oroch does not have a writing system. Although the 2021 census shows that 119 people speak Oroch, it is actually presumed that only between 20 to 40 people can speak this language fluently. Oroch belongs to the southern Tungusic branch. Its status is critically endangered. Negidal is the language of the Negidal people, who live slightly north of the Nanay homeland. The 2021 census records the Negidal population at 481, making them the second smallest Tungusic group. The exact origins of the Negidal people are difficult to pinpoint due to the migratory and intermingling nature of the indigenous peoples of East Siberia. However, it is believed that they emerged as a distinct group through a combination of intermarriage and cultural exchange between Evenki populations and other neighboring indigenous groups such as the Nivk and Ainu. The Negidal language is closely related to Evenki and Evan. The name Negidal is derived from the Evenki word Nigedida, meaning coastal or riverbank dwellers, reflecting their traditional settlement patterns. Although many sources refer to Negidal as a separate language, there are also considerable claims that it is a dialect of Evenki. Historically, the Negidals were semi-nomadic, relying on hunting, fishing, and reindeer herding for their subsistence. They were skilled hunters and fishers, catching species like salmon in the rivers. Their economy was traditionally based on the seasonal cycles of nature, and they used the resources of the taiga and rivers sustainably. The traditional religion of the Negidals involved animistic beliefs. Today, alongside traditional beliefs, Christianity is also common in the Negidal community. Like many indigenous peoples in Russia's Far East, the Negidals were influenced by the activities of Russian Orthodox missionaries. Negidal has two dialects, upper and lower. However, it is believed that the lower dialect has gone extinct. Between 2005 and 2017, several field studies attempted to document Negidal speakers. Despite these efforts, no lower Negidal speakers were found. However, multiple upper Negidal speakers were recorded. When it comes to the question whether Negidal has an alphabet, the answer is both yes and no. Until the late 20th century, Negidal was a spoken language only. In 1992, an alphabet based on the Cyrillic script was created for this language, but it has not been widely used. In 2010, however, a textbook in Negidal was published for primary schools. Today, most Negidals speak Russian. Many Negidal speakers are elderly, making it almost impossible to pass the language on to younger generations. It is commonly accepted that Negidal will become a dead language within 2 to 3 decades. Negidal is written in the Cyrillic script. However, as mentioned earlier, it is important to note that almost no one uses Negidal for written communication. According to the 2021 Russian census, 29 people speak this language. It belongs to the northern Tungusic branch, and its status is critically endangered. Orok, not to be confused with Oroch, which we recently covered, is the language of the Orok people. The Oroks, also known as the Uilta people, are the smallest Tungusic group with a population of 268. They primarily inhabit Sakhalin Island in Russia, and there may be a very small Orok community on Japan's Hokkaido Island. In 1980, it was documented that around 20 Oroks lived on Hokkaido, a few of whom spoke Orok. However, the current number of Oroks on Hokkaido is unknown. The ancestors of the Oroks are believed to have lived in the region around the Amur River and northeastern Asia. They eventually spread into the Russian Far East, including Sakhalin Island. This island, situated between the Sea of Okhotsk and the Pacific Ocean, provided a rich but challenging environment for their traditional subsistence activities, which included hunting sea mammals, fishing, and reindeer herding. Over time, the Oroks developed distinct cultural practices and social structures influenced by their environment and interactions with neighboring groups. The Orok people lived in small, extended family groups. Their social structure was relatively egalitarian, with leadership roles often based on respect and skill rather than formal authority. Today, the Orok people face challenges related to preserving their cultural identity and language, partly due to their declining population and the continued dominance of the Russian language. Historically, Orok was an oral language with no native writing system. In the 20th century, attempts were made to develop a writing system for the language, typically using a modified Cyrillic alphabet. However, this system has not been widely adopted, and the language remains primarily oral. Some sources estimate the number of Orok speakers to be between 40 and 116, but a more realistic range is likely between 20 and 40. Orok belongs to the southern Tungusic branch and is classified as critically endangered. Alright, things are about to get interesting with Manchu, a language I personally find full of contrasts. The Manchu people are by far the largest Tungusic group with a population of around 10.6 million. However, the Manchu language is the least spoken of the Tungusic languages with around 20 speakers, an incredible contrast. The Manchu language will be the focus of our longest segment in this video. I'll first delve into the history of the Manchu people in detail and then provide in-depth information about the language itself. Also, if you have been watching this video up to this point, you're a true supporter, and I'm so happy to share this linguistic journey with you. The origins of the Manchu people can be traced back to the Jurchen tribes, who were a part of the larger Tungusic-speaking groups in Northeast Asia. They lived primarily in the forests and mountains of Manchuria, a region that today lies between China, Russia, and North Korea. The Jurchens were originally semi-nomadic, engaging in hunting, fishing, and some agriculture, and they had a tribal social structure. The Jurchens first rose to prominence in the early 12th century when they founded the Jin dynasty in 1115. The Jin dynasty adopted many elements of Chinese culture and governance while maintaining their distinct identity. However, the dynasty eventually fell to the Mongols in the early 13th century, and the Jurchens were absorbed into the Mongol-led Yuan dynasty. After the fall of the Jin dynasty, the Jurchens retreated to their homeland in Manchuria, living under the shadow of the Mongol Empire and later the Ming dynasty. During this period, the Jurchens continued to maintain their distinct culture and language despite interactions and conflicts with the neighboring Chinese and Mongol states. In 1635, Hong Taiji, son of the Jurchen leader Nurhaci, officially adopted the name Manchu for the Jurchen people and language. The reasons for this change are still debated, but it likely reflected an effort to unify the people under a new distinct identity as they prepared to challenge the Ming dynasty for control of China. Under Hong Taiji and his successors, the Manchus expanded their influence and eventually conquered Beijing in 1644, establishing the Qing dynasty, which would rule China until 1912. The Qing dynasty marked the culmination of the Manchus' rise from a collection of semi-nomadic tribes to the rulers of one of the world's most powerful empires. It was the last imperial dynasty of China, under which China experienced substantial territorial expansion, including the annexation of Tibet, Xinjiang, Taiwan, and Mongolia. Culturally, the Manchus have roots in broader Tungusic traditions, which include shamanism, a deep connection to nature, and a distinct language related to other Tungusic languages like Evenki and Nanai. The Manchu rulers maintained their distinct identity through policies promoting the Manchu language and culture, while also adopting many aspects of Han Chinese culture. They imposed strict regulations to prevent intermarriage between the Manchus and Han Chinese, ensuring the preservation of their ethnic identity. After the fall of the Qing dynasty, the Manchu people faced significant challenges. Many Manchus assimilated into Han Chinese society, adopting Han surnames and customs to avoid discrimination. The Manchu language and cultural practices gradually declined, although recent years have seen efforts to revive them. Today, with a population of over 10 million, the Manchu people are recognized as one of China's 56 ethnic groups. Although many have been fully assimilated, some efforts are being made to preserve and revive the Manchu language, culture, and traditions. Now, let's explore the Manchu language in detail. Among all the Tungusic languages, Manchu is historically the most significant. While the other Tungusic languages are also important, Manchu was the only one made the official language of a powerful empire. Manchu evolved from the Jurchen language, spoken by the Jurchen tribes of Northeast Asia, who, as we recently mentioned, were the ancestors of the Manchu people. In the 12th century, during the Jin dynasty, the Jurchen language was written using a script derived from Khitan, a Mongolic language. This script was complex and not widely adopted. After the fall of the Jin dynasty and the decline of Jurchen political power, the use of Jurchen language and script diminished. In the early 17th century, under the leadership of Nurhaci, the Manchu language was revitalized as part of his efforts to unite the Jurchen tribes and create a new Manchu identity. Nurhaci ordered the creation of a new script for the Manchu language based on the Mongolian script, which itself derived from the Uyghur script. The Manchu script is written vertically from top to bottom and left to right, similar to the Mongolian script. It consists of letters representing consonants and vowels, and the script was designed to accommodate the phonetic structure of the Manchu language. This new script made the language more accessible and standardized for administrative and military purposes. With the establishment of the Qing dynasty in 1644, the Manchu language became the official language of the imperial court, government, and military. During the early Qing period, Manchu was widely used for official documents, edicts, and communication within the ruling elite. The language played a key role in the administration of the vast Qing Empire, which included various ethnic groups and languages. However, even during the height of the Qing dynasty, Manchu was not the primary language of the majority Han Chinese population. Instead, it coexisted with Classical Chinese, which remained the dominant language among the common people. The use of Manchu began to decline in the 18th century as the Qing rulers increasingly adopted Chinese language and customs. Over time, even the Manchu elite became more Sinicized, and the Manchu language was gradually replaced by Chinese in both official and daily use. By the late 19th century, Manchu had largely fallen out of use as a spoken language, and it continued to decline after the fall of the Qing dynasty in 1912. It is astonishing that such a prominent language now has only a few dozen speakers. In recent years, efforts to revive and preserve the Manchu language have been made, particularly among scholars and members of the Manchu ethnic group. These efforts include teaching Manchu in universities, publishing textbooks and dictionaries, and digitizing historical Manchu texts. The language remains of great interest to historians and linguists because of its importance in understanding Qing dynasty history and administration. A significant number of Qing-era documents are written in Manchu, making knowledge of this language valuable for research in this field. Manchu is written in the Manchu script and is currently spoken by around 20 people. It belongs to the southern Tungusic branch and is classified as critically endangered.